Hey everybody, Mark here with Lars. Lars and I actually a couple months ago had a great conversation about what he was doing to write books assisted by AI, specifically Grok. And I thought that a lot of people would be interested in that because, as an example, I actually have a platform that I wrote for high school kids to submit stories, short stories, once a month to the platform. And the teachers were complaining that they were finding more and more that kids were using AI to create short stories. And so they wanted to know how to stop the kids. And I said, well, you don't stop the kids, you teach them how to use it properly. And that's what Lars is going to get into today, because we're going to talk a little bit about quality. We're going to talk about the interaction between human and the platform itself. Lars, I'm really looking forward to it. So hope you have a good time. And you're up.
Thanks. Some people in the chat are saying that they can't see my video. Okay, now they can, he say. Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, so let me just share the screen over
All right. I'm
here.
going to go back to the backstage, but I'll be watching. Okay.
Yep. All right. So I'm going to be talking about a book I've written. It's a science fiction novel. It's close to 400 pages long, and I relied heavily on AI assistance when I wrote this book. And I'm going to be talking today about the process that I used when I wrote this book rather than the actual contents of the book. The book is available on Amazon, so if you're interested afterwards, you can find it there. And yeah, it's at reasonably priced. I didn't price it that high given how much time I spent on this one. So the actual story behind writing this book started a long time ago. I think we have to go back to 1984 when I got my first computer. It was a Commodore 64. And one of the very first games that I got was this game called Zork. And it was in the category of interactive fiction. And what it does is actually it presents you with an environment and you have a prompt where you can type in instructions. You have an inventory where you can stash things, and then you go about this world and solve problems. And of course, they had quite a limited interpreter back then to interpret the stuff or the instructions that I wrote. So I would say about 99% of the things that I wrote, it wouldn't understand. But even though it just understood 1% of the stuff I wanted it to do, it still became quite a compelling game. And I really loved those interactive fiction games that Infocom produced back then. And I had like that feeling, and I really that was sort of something that I kept dear at heart and kept with me over the years. And if we move forward to recent times, um, someone at my workplace started talking about AI and that there was something bubbling, something coming that was called ChatGPT. And this was very new, and there was a wait list to get into the beta version of that. So I signed up for the beta version of ChatGPT, and I was invited a couple of days later to try it out. And one of the first things I tried out when I was given access was actually to ask it to recreate an interactive fiction game to pretend it was the Infocom interpreter and let me play Zork. The difference now being that instead of just understanding 1% of the instructions I gave it, it would understand like 99% of the instructions that I gave it. So playing this game of Zork in ChatGPT, so many years later, while with opening up all of these possibilities that I didn't have back then, was a great experience actually, and that sort of started me thinking that these large language models are really creative and good at storytelling. So it could keep me engaged like for a few hours in this interactive fiction story. And over the years, I also had this idea in the back of my mind that I wanted to put into a book at some point, but I realized that I'm not a very good author. My English or my prose is not good enough to write, and it's also a big hurdle when you look at the time commitment that you would have to do to actually write a book. So this sort of was something that I shelved, and it remained there, and just a dream in the back of my mind. So, of course, when ChatGPT then launched, I had a presentation at work where I was supposed to present some things about what was coming with AI. And one of the things I wanted to show was actually this interactive fiction type gaming that you could do with it. But what happened was that they put in a lot of guardrails into ChatGPT. It was quite open with what you could do to begin with, but then you got these guardrails. And when I was doing the presentation, you could actually not do this type of gaming with interactive fiction. It would just say that, no, I can't mimic the Infocom interpreter. That would sort of be infringement. And ever since, I think most other companies that also produce large language models, they have quite a lot of guardrails around their models when you start using them, even when new versions are launched. But then came Grok, and Grok was a model that I heard was going to have less guardrails. So when Grok was released, I had an idea to actually try to use it to write a book. And this is the result. So let me talk a little bit about myself first. I run a consultant company where we work with information modeling, and I also do large-scale financial simulations where we look into the future, sort of like a crystal ball, and try to see what happens. I'm also an associate researcher at Stockholm University within the area of information modeling, where we produce some scientific papers. And I've been doing this since 2008. I run a number of open source projects. I'm a firm believer in open source, so most of the stuff I do is also available on GitHub. And among these things is a data modeling tool for anchor modeling. We have a metadata-driven data warehouse automation framework. I wrote an iPhone app to do live streaming. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with GitHub, but if you look at the green dots down at the bottom, you can see there is a lot more of the green dots to the right there. And this is sort of like a timeline. So the reason that there's more green dots to the right is because I started using artificial intelligence to assist my work in these open source projects as well. So my productivity after starting to use AI for pretty much everything, and I'm using it daily now, has been great. Someone said in a talk yesterday, they went from being overwhelmed to overproductive. And I feel that way too. I can produce much more in a much shorter time frame these days than I could before. And one of the most recent things I did was something called the digit bin index. It's something that we use in these financial simulations. And as it turns out, that's sort of one of the most popular projects I've released. I released it 2 weeks ago, and it's already got 15,000 downloads. So I'm also a volleyball trainer and a coach. Bear with me here. I'm just going to try to paint a picture of that I'm busy. So I'm also a volleyball trainer, a coach, and I coach some girls that are 16 to 18 years old. I played volleyball myself a long time ago. And we have a YouTube channel, and this is why I wrote that streaming software, because, well, we use that software to stream our games live on YouTube. I'm also a frequent speaker, so if you go on YouTube and look for my name, you can probably find most of my presentations there. There's also some extracurricular stuff. I do gaming when I have the time, just to keep myself sane. So, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on. So there's not really that much extra time to do anything, to be honest. And at many times I felt overwhelmed. But thanks to AI, my life is becoming more manageable and I can produce much more. Yeah. So there was sound on this one. I didn't know that. I'm talking to the dog there. I'm also father, husband, and a dog owner. So, given all this, I had to put some constraints into this book project. First, I just verified that it looked like Grok would be able to produce quite good prose. So, I said to myself, I don't want to spend any more than 100 hours on this. And I'm going to use the free version of Grok as well. So, my goal was to spend absolutely no money at all when writing this book. And all in all, I spent 100 hours doing this from the release of Grok 3 on the 20th of February. And I finished it on March 28th, it was finished a little bit while earlier, but that was the date it came up on Amazon as a published book. And of course, I didn't really know what it entails to write a book. There's quite a lot of things that need to happen in this process. So this is sort of the process I had when I worked with the book. I started by bouncing ideas with Grok, this idea that I had in the back of my mind. I asked it, and we talked about what do I really need in order to create a book, what's usually the first stuff an author does. And it told me that you need character sheets, you should do some sort of world building. I wanted to have historical vignettes, like sort of historical flashbacks within the book that were accurate. And we needed to do some research on that as well. And I had help from Grok to produce all of these three things. And after that, we went into the draft writing, where we started to actually produce chapter by chapter using Grok, where I acted very much as the sort of the director. I had this very simple script that I used as prompts, and I asked Grok to produce a chapter given that script. And then we would refine that in an iterative process until I was satisfied with the chapter. And then we will move on to the next chapter. And those scripts that I fed it as prompts, they were anything from quite detailed. Sometimes when I knew it was an important chapter to sometimes I just needed to sort of fill out and have some I gave Grok a lot of leeway and I maybe said I just want a chapter with these two persons talking or doing something specific. So when you have a draft of a book, what usually happens after that is that you have a developmental editor, which is a person that comes in, reads your text and tells you that, well, this character lacks depth, or you have a plot hole in your story, things like that. And of course, here I also wanted to use AI, but in order to get like a different perspective, I used Gemini here instead of Grok. And they have very different personalities, if you like, where Grok is sort of like an artist when you talk to them. Gemini is much more like a scientist. So they had a very different way of expressing themselves. But I really liked this sort of more analytical way of working that Gemini had. So Gemini took the whole document. They have a very large context. It has a very large context window, so it can keep an entire book in its memory, so to speak. And it gave very good feedback. So after feeding the whole book to Gemini, we went through the feedback again with Grok and did refinements. And at that point, I felt quite satisfied with the book. I read it from start to finish myself, and I was surprised at how enjoyable the book actually turned out to be. Um, I made some very minor adjustments myself. Mainly, it was repetition of phrases or words that I rephrased or reworded, but not much that I had to do at that point. And that meant that content-wise, the book was sort of finished. So I then went on to, because if you want to publish, you also need a cover. So I used something called Playground, which is an image generator, AI backed, of course, to generate a cover, just the actual cover image. Then I added the actual title and my name myself using Inkscape. And at that point, I had sort of all the things I needed to publish a digital book. But I also wanted this to become a physical book. I'm sort of old school, and I actually still like reading books, physical books, holding them in my hands. And that also meant that I had to produce something that was suitable for print. So I used something called Overleaf. I'm going to go into some more details later, but after using that, I was able to produce a print version as well. And finally, in order to actually get this out onto the market, I signed up for something called Kindle Direct Publishing from Amazon. And if you have like a ebook and a print book, they can produce both for you. So the book is listed on Amazon. Same thing with Google Books, but there is just the ebook. And then I also used Ingram Spark for a hardcover version of the book because Amazon only do soft covers. And I was AI assisted in every single step here. And looking at the time that I spent on the different steps, I think the first one was about 2 hours, then 6 hours for those character sheets and world building and stuff, about 70 hours. That's where the bulk of the time was, doing all the chapters, the developmental editing, the back and forth, 10 hours there, about 8 hours for the cover design and doing the print. And just publishing all the stuff was very easy, signing up for accounts and just uploading the raw material. So 4 hours there. So those were the around 100 hours that I actually spent doing this. And this is, of course, ridiculously short if you compare to what it would have taken to write this book in a traditional manner. Not to mention that it would involve many more people than myself, like the editors and artists and stuff that I would have had to use. And one other thing is also copy editing is something that you normally do. That's sort of another job that's out there as a copy editor. You get a manuscript and you check for spelling errors, grammatical errors, things like that. And you don't need that because you know that the prose that comes out of these large language models is pretty much flawless to begin with. So I didn't spend any time on that at all. So speaking of, yesterday also someone spoke about like job replacement, and I actually feel sorry for these copy editors. Yeah, uh, that's the way it is. So what was the idea then? Well, my idea was simple. I had this idea. Uh, it came to me when I was studying quantum mechanics at the university in the 90s. And there are different interpretations of quantum mechanics. The Copenhagen interpretation is sort of like trying to understand what the underlying world is actually, given that quantum mechanics is working. And I had this sort of science fiction-y idea where you find a loophole in an interpretation like this. And the book is about how this loophole manifests itself and the consequences of that. So I had this story in my mind, and like I said, I gave the script, my ideas as prompts for what I wanted Grok to produce. And this, you see on the left-hand side here, is one of the prompts that I actually used, sort of for one of the more important chapters in the book. And sometimes Grok would completely derail. So it wasn't a process that was always straightforward. Sometimes stuff happened, and in this case, it was like yeah, it could go into like M dash overload. It was just producing a lot of M dashes in the actual output, and so I had to refine the way I did my prompts. So sometimes I actually had to restart the whole session and just give it the stuff that we've done so far as input and say, hey, we're writing a book together. Let's continue now, because you derailed in the previous session, and we could get around things like this. But as you can see, the stuff on the right is absolutely, it's not readable at all. But the end result came out really, really well. As you can see, this is a page from the ebook, what it looks like in the Apple ebook reader. This is what the print version looks like. Really stylish, looks very well. The prose is excellent in the book. I'm astounded by how deep and emotional Grok was able to make the characters and the story, given what it is. It's just a large language model in the bottom, but I suppose producing language and text is what it's actually best at. This is what it looks like on Amazon, and very quickly, the way I worked was I had Grok. This is from like what tooling I used. I used Tipora. That's an editor that uses Markdown. I don't know if you're aware, but most of these large language models produce Markdown in their answers. That's the way they format it. So that's why you get like these nice bold, italics, bullet style lists, stuff like that. And I kept all of the work we were doing in this master document. So every chapter that I was satisfied with, I would paste into Tipora and save it to this master document, like the whole book. And I feed that back to Grok if we did a session reset. And Grok also has a large context window, so it was able to keep the entirety of the book in its memory and understand everything that had happened before. And once I was done with that, you can actually, from Tipora, generate an EPUB, the digital version of the book directly. It had a style sheet. I wasn't satisfied with some of the formatting in the ebook. So again, I just asked Grok and I fed it the style sheet and I said, this is the current style sheet. Can you alter it? So because I'm not satisfied with what this looks like. And sure enough, I got a different style sheet back. And after that, yeah, I was pleased with that. Uh, to get it to print, it was a little bit more difficult. Thankfully, since I had written scientific articles before, I was familiar with a typesetting language called LaTeX. And you can also uh, from from Tipora export to LaTeX. I also there made some small modifications because I wanted to use something called a novel class. And from LaTeX, you can install it on your desktop and generate beautiful print. But I used an online version of it called Overleaf. And from that, I generated the printer-ready PDF files. And of course, given that I have a programming background, I also kept all of these things, all of these artifacts that I had on GitHub. So I had everything versioned, controlled as well, which came in handy because I could always go back and look at revisions and see what I had done and not done. If something, yeah, for some reason didn't work or turned out well, I could revert to a previous version. So this is sort of the workflow that I used. Not that many tools and all of them available for free except Tipora. Tipora is free to use for 30 days, so I could have used that, but I already had I think it's $15 for a lifetime license, so it's cheap and I already had that. What have I learned from AI-assisted authoring? Well, I think one of the main things I learned is that if you use AI assistance, it's enough today to actually have a good story. If you are a decent storyteller, but you don't really have the prose or understand the writing process, you can get that story told in the form of a book. And I think a lot of people out there have good stories to tell, but they're limited by the fact that there are so many other hurdles that they would have to pass in order to get it out into a book. But I believe that will change in the future dramatically. I also chose to write this book in English, even if it's not my first language, because simply English has a much better reach. There's much more people speaking English than Swedish. And another thing that I actually discovered in the process is that English is a very lexically rich language. There's like things that I would need a whole sentence to describe in Swedish that is captured by a single word in English, which is amazing because you can get all of these nuances captured in sort of ways that I couldn't have done in Swedish without it sounding like yeah, weird for reasons. I'm very satisfied with how the prose came out in the book. And it's also now possible to produce books in a much tighter schedule. So even people with busy lives can actually manage to perhaps find the time to write a book if they use AI assistance. After I wrote the book, I went into groups, forums, discussion forums, chats where people, both aspiring authors and published authors, hang out. And I came in there quite naively and thought like, I want to talk about my experience writing an AI-assisted book. And that actually had me kicked out of most of the groups immediately. And they said all sorts of things about what I was doing. You have to know that there are groups out there that are vehemently like expressing AI hate for reasons beyond me, but I believe that well, it's sort of job security or like they have invested a lot of time into becoming very good at producing eloquent prose, and here comes someone who's written a book that's not good at producing eloquent prose, but was able to do it anyway with the help of AI. And of course, there are concerns here. There are some ethical concerns. I mean, how did Grok get so good at producing eloquent prose? Well, it had some sort of training material, and in that training material was, of course, like the works of many of the existing authors. So what is Grok doing here? Have they somehow stolen this from the authors? Or yeah, I don't really know what to say there, but if you look at the story I wrote, it's definitely my story. It's just that the prose is good. And I said to some of the people in the group, well, what if I had read a lot of your works and your works inspired me and I wanted to use the same type of process you have in your works? Would you accuse me of stealing? I don't know. And of course, there are other dilemmas as well. Given how easy it was for me to produce all of this, I can definitely see a future where, and I think this is already happening, a lot of garbage is also produced. If I hadn't been so strict with the script and what I wanted to produce, I could have just told Grok to produce a story on a certain topic and just have it produce whatever it wanted, and that wouldn't have been good. If I wasn't as stringent with my prompting, it would produce stuff still, but it wouldn't be very good. So as for now anyway, you have to have a certain amount of involvement to produce good AI text. Who knows, that could change in the future, but that's where we are at right now. Okay, so very quickly, also, I know I'm a little bit over time, but I wanted to mention this also. How do I see the future then of authorship? Well, we can draw a parallel back to something called computing. Computing back in the 1960s was something that people did by hand manually. So NASA actually had a staff of what they call computers, but the computers weren't what we are used to today. They were people actually doing calculations by hand. And the image on the left is actually from NASA itself. And that's what it looked like when they were like doing calculations by hand, trying to get like something to land on the moon. Whereas today we have something called a computer, which this is the NASA supercomputer. And we don't do these things by hand anymore because that would be completely unreasonable. No one would do it today. It's just not a thing that you do. It's very likely that the future authorship will be the same thing. Before you were this author, you were doing all the work yourself, manually, sitting on a typewriter, typing out every word by hand. Why wouldn't this transform in the same way? So instead of authoring, you will have this thing that is the authorer that does the stuff for you with some guidance or goals where you decide what you want it to do. And this is very likely to happen. So with that, I would like to say thank you. And before I leave, I'm just going to check the chat. And of course, this was such a fun experience that I'm already working on a second book using Grok 4 now. And this book is about actually sort of a meta book because it's about large language models themselves. Where you use quantum entanglement to fiddle with the transformers and weird things happens. So thank you for listening. So I'm going to stop the sharing. Going to see here. Yeah, people are jumping into different presentations. That's all. Okay, thank you very much for listening, everyone, and have a great day or evening wherever you are in the world. Thanks.